At the beginning of this story, we are taken back to 1975, where we see Jean Grey as a little girl. She already had telepathic and telekinetic powers and was traveling somewhere in a car with her parents. A song was playing in the car. Jean asked her mom to change the song, but her mom refused, saying that when Jean would grow up and drive her own car, she could then listen to whatever song she liked. Hearing this, Jean became sad. Suddenly, the song changed on its own. Jean's mom played the previous song again, but Jean lost control over her powers, causing her mom to pass out. Their car crashed into another car coming from the opposite direction. It was a devastating accident in which Jean's parents died, but Jean herself didn't even get a scratch. The doctors were shocked after seeing this, so they called Charles Xavier to the hospital because they realized Jean was a mutant. Jean was sitting in the hospital when Charles arrived. Jean asked Charles about her parents, and Charles explained to her that her parents had died in the accident, but assured her she wasn't alone. He told her he had a school specially for kids like her and asked if she would like to come. Jean initially didn't want to go with Charles, so to persuade her, Charles gifted her a pen and explained that it was just a gift. She could either use it to draw beautiful paintings or to poke someone's eye out. Whatever she chose to do with it, he would help her if she wanted to do something good. Jean understood his point and agreed to go to his school, known as the X-Mansion. Jean saw Charles's school, which was very big and beautiful, but she refused to stay there. When Charles asked why, Jean said that she broke everything she touched and didn't want to ruin such a beautiful place. Charles promised her that whatever she broke, he would fix, and he would make sure she wouldn't have to break anything. Hearing this, Jean became happy. Next, we see a scene from 1992. NASA had sent a team of scientists into space on a rocket. However, the rocket faced problems, and communication with it was lost. Charles was watching the news with Hank when the president called him, asking for help to save the scientists. Charles signaled to Hank, who then revealed his true mutant form. Then, we see the X-Men team assembling, which included Hank, Mystique, Storm, Cyclops, Scott, Jean, and Quicksilver, Peter. They boarded their jet and flew into space. They spotted the rocket, and nearby there was some strange energy slowly approaching it. The rocket was spinning too fast for Kurt, Nightcrawler, to get inside. Mystique instructed Cyclops to fire a laser beam to slow the rocket down. Cyclops used his laser beam to slow the rocket. Mystique then sent Kurt along with Quicksilver to enter the rocket. Once inside, Quicksilver quickly undid the scientists' seatbelts and touched them, allowing Kurt to teleport them back to the jet. However, one scientist said their commander was still working in the airlock. Mystique didn't want to risk another trip, but Charles, speaking through Cerebro, insisted that Jean could hold the rocket together, allowing them to save the commander. Following Charles's advice, Mystique sent Jean with Kurt to the rocket. Mystique gave them only 30 seconds because after that the rocket would be consumed by the energy. Jean stabilized the rocket while Kurt searched for the commander. Even after 20 seconds, Kurt hadn't found the commander. Finally, at 25 seconds, he found him, but there was no time left as the energy approached. Kurt teleported back to the jet with the commander, but Jean remained on the rocket. The energy started entering Jean's body. Eventually, a huge explosion occurred. Everyone thought Jean had died, but then they saw her. She had survived, and the energy continued to flow into her body. After all the energy disappeared into her, Kurt teleported Jean back to the jet. After arriving, Jean opened her eyes, and everyone was thrilled to see her alive. They returned to Earth, where Americans applauded the X-Men's heroism. Charles praised all the children and allowed them to party for the day. After everyone left, Mystique confronted Charles, accusing him of putting the children's lives in danger just to feed his ego. Charles argued that as long as they faced dangers for humanity, humans would love them. Mystique retorted that she never saw him face dangers himself. It was always the women saving everyone. She told Charles that he should rename the team from X-Men to X-Women before walking away. Later, Hank examined Jean. When he used a machine to measure her powers, it couldn't register her abilities anymore. Hank told Jean that after what happened in space, she had become far more powerful, but reassured her that there was no need to worry. Meanwhile, on an island, a family was having dinner when they heard their dog barking. A woman went outside and encountered some aliens who killed her and took her appearance. Many aliens did the same with others nearby. These aliens were secretly looking for Jean. Meanwhile, the X-Men were partying in a park. Jean and Scott were also there, talking to each other. They loved each other, but since Jean absorbed the energy in space, Scott had noticed some changes in her. Jean asked Scott to dance, but when she looked into Hank's eyes, she lost control of her powers and caused a massive blast. Charles was at an event receiving a medal from the president when he learned about the blast. He immediately left the event and returned to the X-Mansion. Charles tried to enter Jean's mind using his telepathy, but failed because Jean had grown too powerful. He then used Cerebro with Hank and Mystique's help to amplify his powers and succeeded in entering her mind. Charles explained to Hank and Mystique that Jean's mind was very fragile and that he had hidden certain memories from her childhood to protect her. However, the cosmic energy had brought those memories back. Jean woke up and, realizing this, asked Charles to get out of her head. She heard her father's voice and realized that he was still alive. Jean forcibly expelled Charles from her mind, causing Charles to faint from the overload and bleed from his nose. Jean then left the mansion. Charles, regaining consciousness, realized Jean had gone and ordered everyone to prepare, as he was planning to bring her back. Jean had gone to her father's house because she had heard his voice due to her heightened powers. Meanwhile, the aliens, led by a woman who had taken a human form, were searching for Jean. They were called Diti. They gathered, and their leader said she would control the power through Jean and use it to resurrect their species on Earth. The next day, Jean arrived at her father's house. She was very happy to see him, but her happiness faded when she learned that her father had abandoned her because he blamed her for her mother's death. Jean was heartbroken. At the same time, Charles and the X-Men arrived. They wanted to take Jean back home, but she refused to go with them. Scott tried to persuade her, but then the police arrived. Hearing the sirens, Jean again lost control and froze all the cars in place with her powers. As she tried to leave, Charles ordered Kurt to stop her. Kurt tried, but couldn't withstand Jean's strength. Jean then fought off everyone at once. Quicksilver tried to reach her with his super speed, but Jean removed the ground from under his feet, causing him to crash hard and paralyze his body. Mystique tried to talk Jean down, but Jean accidentally blasted her, causing a wooden plank to pierce through Mystique's stomach, killing her. After Mystique's death, Jean fled. The X-Men were devastated. They returned home with Mystique's body and held her funeral. Hank blamed Charles for Mystique's death, accusing him of tampering with Jean's mind, which suppressed her pain and anger, emotions that eventually exploded and caused Mystique's death. Hank confronted Charles, but Charles refused to accept any blame. He wasn't admitting his mistake, so Hank leaves Charles's side. Now we see the leader of the Diti and one of her companions, who had come to Jean's father's house asking about Jean. But Jean's father refuses to tell them anything. So, the alien kills Jean's father and extracts all the information from him. On the other side, we see Jean arriving at an island where Eric lives with his mutant companions. Jean wants to meet Eric. Eric recognizes her and invites her into his home. Jean had come to Eric because he too was once a killer who had murdered many people. Jean wanted to ask him how he stopped killing people and gained control over his powers. But even Eric couldn't help her. Meanwhile, military helicopters arrive at the island. They were there to find Jean. Eric tries to stop them from finding her. However, Jean's powers overwhelm her, and she steps out herself. Jean walks outside and uses her powers to tear apart one of the military helicopters. She then moves on to destroy the second helicopter too, but Eric uses his power to stop her from destroying it. He places all the soldiers back into the helicopter and pushes it away. Eric then asks Jean to leave the island. Jean says, "I heard you protect mutants." Eric replies, "I am protecting my people from you." Hearing this, Jean leaves. Now the government had started discussions about creating new laws for mutants. Seeing all this on the news, Charles calls the president, but the president refuses to talk to him. Next, we see the Diti leader, who had found Jean. She approaches Jean and manipulates her with her words, and succeeds. She takes Jean to a hotel room in New York, where she reveals to Jean that the energy she absorbed in space wasn't solar radiation. It was an energy that could bring dead planets back to life. The Diti leader tells Jean that they tried multiple times to control this power, but failed. Jean is the only one in the world who has managed to control it. Meanwhile, we see Hank visiting Eric. Hank asks Eric to help him find Jean. Eric initially refuses, but when Hank tells him that Jean killed Mystique, Eric changes his mind because he too once loved Mystique. Now Eric's spies discover that Jean is in New York. Eric dons his helmet once again and becomes Magneto. He arrives in New York along with Hank and two of his companions. Charles, too, reads Hank's mind through Cerebro and learns that Eric is heading to New York to kill Jean. So Charles takes Scott, Storm, and Kurt with him to stop Eric. Charles tries to stop Eric and Hank, but Eric evades them and reaches the hotel where Jean was. He wants to kill her, but by now, Jean had started believing the Diti leader, who had told her that everyone was trying to kill her because they didn't understand her. Thus, Jean was now ready to fight them too. As Eric enters, he tries to attack Jean. However, Jean is far more powerful. She crushes Eric's helmet and throws him out of the hotel, rendering him unconscious. Charles then uses Kurt's help to enter the hotel. But Jean believes Charles is also there to kill her, and she considers him an enemy too. She is about to kill Charles when he tells her, "I can't read your mind, but you can read mine." Listening to Charles, Jean looks into his mind and remembers what Charles had once told her, that she had a gift and she could use it for good or evil. Jean also sees that when her father abandoned her, it was Charles who raised her. Now Jean lets Charles go and tells the Diti leader that she doesn't want the energy anymore and asks her to take it away. This is exactly what the Diti leader wanted. She starts drawing the energy from Jean. Jean begins to lose consciousness. Charles pleads with the Diti leader to let Jean go, warning that Jean will die. But the Diti leader coldly tells Charles that their lives mean nothing to her and that she will kill everyone. Hearing this, Charles urges Jean to move away, but Jean had already fallen unconscious. Just then, Scott arrives and shoots the Bari leader with his laser beams. Outside, military soldiers had arrived and were capturing all the mutants by knocking them unconscious and putting special collars around their necks, which suppressed their powers. The soldiers enter the hotel and collar Scott, Charles, and Jean as well, taking them away. The military was transporting everyone to a mutant prison by train. Everyone was still wearing the collars, preventing them from using their powers. Jean was unconscious on the train too. Charles apologizes to Hank for his mistakes and admits he was wrong. He tells everyone that the aliens are coming again to take the energy, and if they succeed, they will kill everyone. Now Eric and the others also understand Charles's point. As the train passes through a tunnel, many aliens climb onto it, trying to break inside. Eric tells the soldiers to release the mutants, but the soldiers believe the mutants are in cahoots with the invaders. However, when they realize that bullets have no effect on the aliens, a soldier releases all the mutants. Now we see a fight scene between the mutants and the Bari aliens. Eric and Charles's teams join forces and fight the aliens, using their unique powers to throw them off the train and kill them. Charles and Scott try to reach Jean. Storm uses her lightning strikes to kill aliens. Kurt fights bravely too. Eric uses his magnetic powers to crush the aliens who wouldn't die by throwing them against the train's compartments. But now, the Bari leader arrives, having become extremely powerful after absorbing some of Jean's energy. She beats down the mutants one by one and advances towards Jean. Charles tries to wake Jean. Jean appears in Charles's mind, and they have a conversation. Charles apologizes for manipulating her mind in the past, but Jean now understands that he did it to protect her, not harm her. He gave her a family and cared for her. Jean forgives Charles. She tells him she now knows what she needs to do. Charles is surprised and asks her what she's going to do. Jean wakes up fully now and lifts the entire train into the air. She tells Charles, "I'm going to protect my family." Jean forms a shield around all the mutants and crushes all the aliens attacking them. She transports everyone to a deserted place where the remaining aliens attack her again. But Jean burns all the aliens to ashes using her powers. Now only the Bari leader was left. She approaches Jean and tries to take the energy from her. Jean lets her absorb it, but soon the Bari leader starts suffering, unable to handle the energy. Jean grabs her hand and continues transferring energy. The mutants, too, feel the effects of Jean's overwhelming power. The Bari leader warns Jean that if she kills her, everyone else will die too, and that Jean cannot control her powers. Hearing this, Jean hesitates for a moment, but she then takes the Bari leader into space. In space, Jean finally kills her. However, Jean's body also vanishes, and we see a final light blast where the shadow of the Phoenix appears. Charles, Scott, and all the mutants witness this and are heartbroken. They realize that Jean sacrificed herself to save them all. But Jean wasn't dead. She had transformed into the Phoenix Force and now existed in space. Afterward, we see that Charles's school was renamed the Jean Grey School. Charles had retired from the X-Men, and Hank had taken over as the school's principal. In the end, we see Charles and Eric talking together. Though they had become enemies over time due to their different ideologies, they were now both retired. Eric invites Charles to come live with him on his island. And with this, the story ends. So if you like this video, please do subscribe to my channel for such recap videos.